CDM Australia, and I'm here with a disaster management committee group in Bangladesh where flooding is a real difficulty, and the group are going to explain the map they've got and some of the things that they do. Okay, so could you explain the map, please, where the houses are?
এটা মনে করো নদী, এটা নদী, নদীর উপর দিয়ে এটা হলো মনে করো এই বাঁধের রাস্তা।
Here we see the river. This is river, and this is the embankment.
তারপরে এটা আমার এই যে নদীর পাশে এই পাশের বাড়িগুলো সর, এটা সর।
These houses are in the chor, and they are the risky houses. They are in risk of flood.
So they don't
এই যে সামলাটাকে
These green houses are house of the persons with disabilities. So we identify.
Okay.
This is a school which is under risk of flood. This is mosque. The church is also at risk of flood.
এটা নদীর মধ্যে, নদীর সাথে এই সাইড দিয়ে এটাও নদীর মধ্যে আছে পুরোটা।
Yes. These infrastructures just beside the river, they are also at risk of flood.
এই বাঁধের এখান থেকে এটা পুরোটাই ঝুঁকিপূর্ণ।
এটা বেশি, তার উপর তো এটা তো ঝুঁকি করে। এটা টোটালটা পানি ওঠে, পানিতে
These infrastructures are at high risk, and they are also at risk, but less than this.
Okay, so can I ask, when the flood comes, what's the main thing that this group does?
জিজ্ঞেস করলো যখন বন্যা আসে তখন এই যে গ্রুপ আপনাদের এই যে দলগুলো কি কি কাজ করে, প্রধানত কি কাজ করে?
প্রধান কাজ করে মানে তখন আমরা একটু হাঁটাহাঁটি করে দেখি যে কার বাড়িতে পানি উঠছে, তখন আর কি আগে বাড়িটা বেশি প্রতিবন্ধীতে কিরকম হয়ে আছে তাক নেই, তারপরে হয়তো গর্ভবতী মাছ।
Yes, when we see that water is coming, we do observe. We go and watch the condition of every houses, and especially the house of persons with disabilities. You see, we already identified them. We go to their houses and see their risk. Then we transfer them in this embankment because these are the safe places.
High ground. Thank you very much. A woman with a disability told me, she said that before this project, this community would rather have looked after their livestock than us. And when the flood came down, they were more concerned for their own livelihood and their own livestock than they were people with disability. And what happened after the project is that the people with disability are actually leading the early warning system and leading in those committees' response. So yeah, there was I think the community was not really looking out for each other as much as they are now, and I'm sure there was an element of that, but it was much more each to their own. This seems to have really pulled people together and certainly ensured that those who are most vulnerable are known, recognised, at the front to be helped first. So there's a couple of ways is to find people. Sometimes it's just asking in the community. Sometimes there's already a network of people with disabilities. That's not the case in most remote rural areas. And you know, from our experience in most remote areas, they're hidden away, unseen, unspoken of. So yeah, so the finding of them might be a house-to-house visit. It might be using the Washington group questions as a short group of those, which is asking, is anyone in this house got particular needs, has particular functional challenges? So it helps identify those people. So this does take local know-how and local expertise, and the partner needs to be trusted in the community to go ahead with this, and the community needs to understand the basis on, you know, what's going on and the reason for this. So really the key thing is, if once we get people, we need to make sure that they can actually attend group meetings and be part of the community activities, be part of meetings, be part of whatever else is happening. And that means being able to provide assistive devices. So that might be crutches, wheelchair, hearing aids, vision aids. And that means finding local providers. You can do that ahead of time, finding out where that would come from, and who could help with that. It means providing a transport allowance, so that people can get to a meeting and later engage in the project. And, you know, where you choose to have your meetings or where you do stuff has to be physically accessible. So you can't have something that's on a second story or up a flight of stairs, or you're leaving people out really evidently. So that's a key thing. So another one is communication. So where you've got people who are deaf or hard of hearing, often they need to bring a family member who can help communicate, because they won't have sign language probably. And so that's really needed. Another one is extreme poverty. So in these really poor areas, people simply just don't have the means to get to a meeting. They may not have time, and that's why the transport allowance is very helpful, just helping them, okay, so you'll be able to catch a taxi to the meeting or get a ride. The other barrier is courage and persistence of the individual and of the community worker. It's a huge challenge for people to step out when they have been unable to play as a child, unable to go to school, unable to socialise. And emerging and joining a group is a very courageous step. And what I hear when I meet those people in the field, it's a courageous step and it changes their lives. So in the very beginning, leaders of the groups were appointed to management committees, the disaster management committees. And very early on, it was realised they're at the table, but they're actually not prepared and able to contribute. They were put there too soon. And so then they took a step back and they decided, right, okay, we need to do this leader training now. We can't have them any longer in those committees without understanding or being able to engage. It's actually a really, could be quite destructive, I guess. So then those leaders had training. And interestingly, the training was away in Dakar, which is a long bus trip. So very long, like I think it might be 24 hours or 18 hours or something. So these are people with disability that often, they haven't travelled, they've been in their local community. So they go to this training in Dakar. Now that in itself really gave them status. Wow, you've been to the capital. You've been to a conference. So this was quite interesting. And I don't know whether that was an intentional part, but that was actually what I heard when I visited this community. That was what I heard from the people around. You know, they've been to the capital, been trained, and it really gave them some status. So they met important people and they came back with stuff to say. So those leaders then became involved in those disaster management committees. So they took up official responsibilities, and those disaster management committees are quite structured. They've got people allocated to first aid, people allocated to assisting people with food, making the announcements that the river's coming. So they took up those official roles, they took on responsibility, and were key people in those. So they were being seen as key activators in changing the way the community responded. So they weren't just expecting to be helped. They were actually getting in and showing they were here to help others as well. So they were part of raising those flags. One fellow I met was responsible for doing the early warning system on a loudspeaker. So they were responsible for teaching and helping others with portable ovens and preparing dry food so that there were stocks when the river came down, and caring for sick people in the shelters. So they were an active part of doing that. They were also part of the community mapping of where do people live, who do we need to go to first. so that they were, you know, they were also informants. But those leaders also went on to do much more in the wider community. And this is really interesting. So at one point there was what they called a cold wave, which I'd call a cold snap. So there was a cold snap, and families were suffering in that community. They did not have blankets, and these were the poorer families, not necessarily people with disability in those households. And these leaders realised there are people here suffering. We've got to collect food and buy blankets, collect money, buy blankets and distribute them. So they did that themselves. A self-help group did that with the leadership of these new leaders. And another key story, the same woman, Ulrika, explained to me that she advocated for 2 years to get their road rebuilt. So these levees are the levees that hold the river out of the community, and they're not always well maintained, and it's a significant thing to get them built. So the area where she lives was very poorly protected, and she just kept going back, probably in the same taxi that the guy that didn't want to have her, kept going back. She advocated to that municipal government until eventually they built that levee and road. And she said that's the thing she's the most proud of, because she says that's helped my whole community. So, you know, that's really a strong element of leadership that she's done. And another thing that leaders have done is pay local taxes. So nobody pays taxes, nobody pays those local taxes, but some leaders of these self-help groups said, well, if you don't pay taxes, how can the government do any of these things? So they paid taxes, and they then got an award for having paid taxes and leading the way. I don't know how much that's taken off, but yeah, really, really powerful leadership in the community, not just about the disaster relief. The woman who tells a story on the End the Cycle videos, Ulrika, told me about how when she went to catch the taxi to go to Dakar, so she was catching a taxi to go to the bus, I think. Now I think she had already been to one training. This was another one, and the taxi said, "No, I'm not taking you. You're not coming in my taxi." And she said the other taxi driver started chiding him and saying, "You've got to take her. She's going for training for all of us. You've got to take her in your taxi." So by then the community already understood and were, you know, together raising that perspective. But that's the kind of discrimination that people face. You can't get in my taxi. I'm not having you in my taxi. So it was quite, it's had a really nice effect. When you can enable people with disability to genuinely join their community, and take leadership. So they won't all be leaders, like in any community, they won't all be leaders, but that forming the group was a key part of helping them to be included, and you know, you attend to their inclusion, but it has a much bigger ripple effect. And you can think of it as a flood, really, can't you, in this story? But it has such a much bigger effect because the whole community benefits. And it makes the community much more, you know, that community is now more resilient. It's more inclusive. It now knows that someone who's pregnant or someone who's older or someone who has a disability or someone with a little baby will need more assistance when things happen. However, they can still be included and contribute significantly. I think one of the key things that happens really is when you get when you have people with disability out and visible and in active roles, and particularly when they're in leadership, people start, it's seeing is believing, you know, people start to see it and go, wow, why did I ever think differently? It used to be really different. But yeah, we really need these people, and they are part of our community, bringing great contribution. Some of the main outcomes that we've seen in this project. First up, we've got flood preparations. So there's now fewer lives lost preparations are in place. Those who are most vulnerable are assisted, and the community works together in a way it certainly didn't before. And secondly, the community sees that people with disabilities will raise their voice. They will know what to expect, and they will take action. So they're now heavily embedded in there as active participants. Thirdly, families and communities are no longer surprised. They no longer object to seeing people with disabilities going out, taking a taxi, selling something at the market, buying something at the market. So there's an expectation again. And then I guess lastly, I'd say that the leaders of people with disability are seen as knowledgeable. I mean, they're listened to. They're people to come to for information. The community will come to them, and the community will come to them to ask them to speak to the government. So they're leading the whole community. Some of these leaders, they're respected, and really they're no longer left behind. They're really right at the front leading.